He's just effectively smashing the system. A lot of people talk about him playing four-dimensional chess. He has this brilliant strategy. But to me, he's playing darts with a javelin. He's going to smash the board and cause danger to all the people around him. So the risks are that international trade gets disrupted and therefore global growth slows.
Last night when Donald Trump threatened Russia with 100% tariffs. So it means my next guest's book is perfectly timed. It's called The Economic Consequences of Mr. Trump, What the Trade War Means for the World. And the author is Philip Coggan, who's with me in the studio now. Hello, Philip.
Hello, Patrick.
So to start with a quote from the book, and I love this, analysing Donald Trump's economic policy is rather like nailing jelly to the wall. I mean, looking at the events of the last 24 hours, do you think the president's learned anything from the fallout, financial chaos of all those previous tariff announcements he's made on April the 2nd and since?
No, there's a wonderful quote from Talleyrand about the French Bourbon monarchy. He said that they'd learned nothing and forgotten nothing. Donald Trump has been in favour of tariffs for 40 years. He says it's one of the most beautiful words in the English language. And he applies them for everything. He applied them initially on Canada and Mexico because of fentanyl imports and illegal immigration. He's threatened them on Brazil because of the trial of Bolsonaro, who tried to organise a coup against the government. May hit a bit close to home, that particular charge. And he's threatening now on Russia. But of course, Russia gets a 50-day extension. Everybody else, it's only until August the 1st. So Russia's being treated really by a different standard than the rest of the world. That wasn't in the initial April the 2nd announcement, any tariffs on Russia. So there's no coherence to it. There's no logic to it. These tariffs are not reciprocal. Other countries are not imposing these kinds of tariffs on the US.
And for that reason, they're quite the economic gamble, aren't they? As you say, they're not reciprocal. Countries are adjusting. They're not imposing tariffs in return. All adds up, as I said, to a big economic gamble. What could the fallout of these, one, the threats, but two, the imposition of tariffs like this, both domestically for Trump in the US and globally?
Well, we've had a system that evolved after the Second World War where over 75, 80 years, we've gradually reduced the barriers to trade, and the volume of world trade's gone up 45-fold. It's been immensely successful for the world, taken many millions of people out of poverty. And he's just effectively smashing the system. A lot of people talk about him playing four-dimensional chess. He has this brilliant strategy. But to me, he's playing darts with a javelin. He's going to smash the board and cause danger to all the people around him. So the risks are that international trade gets disrupted and therefore global growth slows. In the US, taxes are not paid largely by the exporting country. They're paid by the importer. They usually fall on consumers and domestic companies. So it means higher costs for consumers, higher prices. It means slower economic growth, and it means more inequality because tariffs fall more on the poorer consumers who spend more of their income on the kind of things that get tariffed and less on the rich.
I think it's important to understand that, yes, we're living through this in 2025, but this is a sort of politics that has quite deep roots on the sort of anti-establishment American right. Ross Perot in the 90s was talking about NAFTA and the giant sucking sound of manufacturing jobs going to Mexico. Trump was writing advertisements in the US papers railing against Japanese imports. But fundamentally, things have, as you say, the global trading system is now baked into the way the global economy works. Do you think Trump fundamentally understands that, or is it a case of, he's been wanting to do this for a very long time, he's finally doing it, and he hasn't really adjusted his views from the late 80s, early 90s?
No, he doesn't understand. So he thinks of US cars as being made entirely from US components.
In Detroit, say.
In Detroit, yes. But 50% of US cars are made of foreign components. 45% of all the things that the US imports are raw materials and components for things that the US makes. So when you raise a tariff, you increase the costs of your domestic producers. And the second thing is about these manufacturing jobs that he wants to bring back. Well, manufacturing jobs have been declining across the Western world as a proportion of the total for 50, 60 years. They have here, they have in Germany, which has a trade surplus. It's because of technology. We make things more cheaply with more machines. In the same way, 200 years ago, everybody worked in agriculture. Now nobody works in agriculture, but we're not starving because we produce more food more efficiently. And the same has been going on in manufacturing. He won't bring those jobs back.
If you are President Xi or President Putin, are you just going to find a workaround for this? And are global supply chains going to sort of mutate and work their way around America? Is that the likeliest thing to happen?
Yes, certainly we've already seen that China is tending to export more of what it makes to Europe and the rest of the world than to the US. And of course, China did impose very high tariffs in retaliation, and it has kind of the whip hand in some areas. It makes these rare earths, which the US really needs for a lot of its goods, and it started not to send them out. And so Trump reduced the tariffs on China, and all that China did in response was to, match that reduction. So that was definitely a score draw in terms of the negotiations. Putin, why would Putin listen to these threats? Again, they're 50 days away. He's threatened them before. He's always somehow seems to give Putin another chance. He has a greater fondness for many dictators than he does for the democratic allies in Europe.
Well, as they're saying on Wall Street, taco, Trump always chickens out. I'm sure Putin is saying the same thing. It's remarkable, though, that the 100% tariffs he's threatening on the Russians, that's only that's only a fifth of what Republicans in Congress are working towards. They've prepared a bill that's calling for 500% secondary tariffs. People are sort of getting high on their own supply here a little bit, are they not?
Yeah, well, 100% tariffs are nonsense. I think he threatened 200% on pharmaceuticals. So you sell something for $50, right? The tariff on that is, on 100%, is another $50. You can't go to the exporter and say, I'd like you to cut your price by $50 to allow for the tariff. That would be giving it away for free. So obviously the domestic consumer has to bear a lot of that burden, or you don't buy those goods at all. And when you had 145% tariffs on China, it meant effectively there was an embargo. Well, if you think back to the Second World War, embargoes and imports, the Germans tried to stop imports coming into the UK. They weren't doing that to try and make Britain great again. They were trying to starve the British economy. If you stop buying things that you need, that hurts you. It doesn't hurt the person who's selling to you.
And the idea that what J.D. Vance might say if he was in the studio was, well, hang on, it'll return good manufacturing jobs to Youngstown, Ohio or whatever. Are you saying that will not happen? No,
it won't happen because it takes years to set up a factory. It costs a lot. And if the reason that people are buying goods from overseas is because it's a lot cheaper. So to get, say, US companies to make textiles or shoes, these low margin things, you'd have to pay workers in the US wages that they get paid in Bangladesh and Vietnam. That's not going to happen, clearly. So you'd have to pay them a lot more, and then the goods and the shoes and the textiles would cost a lot more. And also it would require a transfer of resources from other bits of the US economy into making low margin things like textiles and shoes. The US has lots of, technology design. It has aerospace. It has lots of powerful services businesses. That's what the US economy is focused on, and it's allowed the low margin stuff to move overseas. Adam Smith wrote about this in 1776, so this was not a new insight. Trump is really 250 years out of date in his economics.
And there are lots of historical parallels in the book. We've touched on several of them already. But you also compare some of Trump's decisions to Winston Churchill's. I'm sure he'd be flattered by that, but should he be?
Well, no. The reason that the title of the book was chosen was because 100 years ago exactly, Winston Churchill put Britain on the gold standard. It was a disaster. It led to deflation, the general strike of 1926. And John Maynard Keynes wrote a book, The Economic Consequences of Mr. Churchill, in an instant response. So my book is a kind of tribute to that Keynes book, The Economic Consequences of Mr. Trump, because it's saying this is an equally foolish, misguided decision that will only bring harm to the US economy and to the rest of the world.
Well, the Keynes of our age, Philip Coggan, thank you very much. And your book, The Economic Consequences of Mr. Trump, What the Trade War Means for the World, is out on Thursday. Thank you very much to Philip Coggan.